Let's suppose that you're out one day having a good time, a date with your sweetheart, a night on the town, whatever, and you come back to find that your house has burned down. Well, what now? I imagine the answers from all of you will vary depending on your social circumstances, financial situation, insurance policy, what valuable personal effects you may have lost to the fire, if anyone else was in the house at the time of the fire, and so on and so forth. But let's forget all of that for a moment and assume the best case scenario. Everyone and everything is either perfectly safe or easily replaced. You can move to a new house or rebuild your old one tomorrow or the next day very easily and quickly. And soon, your whole life is back to normal and you go back to having a good time. This all sounds all well and good, right? You know, your house burned down, but it was a minor setback, life goes on, case closed. But what if I told you that your house burned down because of a series of slow, perpetual fires sweeping the country, burning down lots of houses, that was set to take many lives, and, were it to be left unchecked, destroy society as we know it? You might say that you'd stay to try and help everyone affected and stop the fire. And if you really would, right on. But would you really? Or would you simply flee and then, once you're clear of the crisis, go back to having a good time? And if this sounds all somewhat familiar to you, like true life somehow, well, that's because it is. Anyway, this video essay is supposedly about Fooly Cooly. So let's talk about that.
Her obsession with Vor seems to be part of a broader obsession with Apocalypse, as they tend to appear side by side in her dreams, most directly in the case of the zombie one. And that obsession stems from what has made that media so popular in recent years, the fantasy of a social reset.
If everything is destroyed, then we can start over again. For one, Mom would no longer be crushed, and also Dad would still be with us.
Here, Miss Pedantic highlights two important themes that will also be relevant to my argument. One that applies specifically to Fooly Cooly Progressive, a social reset. I'll come back to that in a minute. And the second applying more broadly to all of Fooly Cooly, that being the apocalypse. It's that specifically that I perceive to be the connective thematic tissue retroactively built by the sequels, as now each of Fooly Cooly's three parts feature the threat of apocalypse, that threat being the iron, the massive medical mechanical plant lying in wait in the distance. And it's the slice of life segments of Fooly Cooly that contrast this threat to form the larger thematic connection, that of apocalyptic ignorance. Fooly Classic doesn't dwell too long on this threat, nor make it a thematic priority. It's important only as an impetus for the plot to drive the story of Naota and his character study. The closest that Fooly Classic comes to directly addressing the theme of apocalypse is in episode 2, when it tells Mamimi's story, but that, I feel, is best reserved for the next section. Naota doesn't care much about the apocalypse, actually. Virtually any and all action he takes against it is directly influenced by the actions of someone else. Naota is a rather passive protagonist, and makes almost zero choices throughout the story, a notable contrast between him and his successors. That doesn't really matter because Naota's choices aren't relevant to his character study. He's a passenger, and his story is about his opinion of what happens to him, which, judging by the continued insistence at the story's conclusion by Naota that
nothing amazing happens here. Everything is ordinary.
Doesn't seem to be very much. It's anti-character development in a sense. He doesn't grow or change, not really. He's still a kid, and sure, a kid who was dragged into the midst of a big three-way intergalactic conflict between the Space Border Control, an extraterrestrial megacore, and a rogue alien cop out for no one but herself. But a kid nevertheless, and a stubborn one at that, content to be indifferent to the apocalypse and go back to living his life the same as always. Naota thinks nothing is exciting because ultimately nothing that happens really has anything to do with him. Hidomi Hibajiri, however, is quite different, as I hinted at earlier. Hidomi is a nihilistic existentialist, as is made consistently clear by her internal monologue.
I have nothing. All that exists is zero. I am nothing forever and ever. And we are on planet Earth.
As Lachlan highlighted in her own video, which, by the way, is pretty good, Hidomi desires a social reset and therefore embraces the apocalypse as her opportunity for such a reset. The narrative embraces this idea, as well as Hidomi's existentialism on the whole, as a good thing, and so she gets her reset. On different terms than she may have initially desired, to be sure, but nonetheless, she still gets the reset. The apocalypse happens, creates the change that Hidomi needed to get over her troubles, and as life starts afresh, everyone moves on with renewed optimism for the future. This makes Fooly Cooly Pro unique among all three Fooly Coolys, as it's the only story of the series that ends with the apocalypse. The only part of Fooly Cooly that ends by bringing change. Change that classic and alt are different and opposed to, respectively. Hidomi is also my favorite Fooly Cooly protagonist because, you see, I too am an existentialist, and I believe that Hidomi is right. The thing about existentialism is that while it's easy to view this philosophy pessimistically, and I'll readily admit that I fall into that trap quite a lot, the other side of that coin is because there is no reason, that means you can create your own reason. Why live? Why love? Why enjoy yourself? Why watch a Fooly Cooly sequel?
What was the reason for doing all this?
No reason for any of it. That thing probably didn't come for a specific reason either.
There's no right or wrong answer for any of that. It's all up to you. But see, the trouble with that conceit is that coming up with our own answers isn't something that most humans are comfortable with. We like thinking there's a reason for everything, that there's some big monolithic text with all the answers.
What is the reason we dream? Could it be because it is called a dream?
And that being why people often devote themselves to institution, to religion, to a particular political party, why people join cults, etc. But really, there's no reason for any of that at all. And sure, that could mean that it's all hopeless and we should just give up and kill ourselves or whatever. But that's kind of lame, isn't it? Well, much as the current state of society might push us towards despair, and it feels that way sometimes, a lot, but, well, that's a topic for another day. In any case, the point is that Hidomi's story isn't about finding any sort of meaning to her life. By the end of the story, she's still a nihilistic existentialist. What she instead comes to learn is that existentialism does not necessarily entail gloom for much the same reasons that I outlined.
There's nothing I want to be. There's nothing I want to do. And that's probably not the best way to be. But, you know what? It probably doesn't matter.
Just because there is no meaning in life, that doesn't mean that we can't enjoy it, because we get to project our own meaning. It's just like our opinion. This message makes an interesting thematic contrast with episode 2 of Fooly Classic. In that episode, Firestarter, Mamimi exhibits an almost cult-like worship of her god of black flames, the supposed protector of the weak, Kantito-sama, whom she believes has come from the heavens as the robot Kanti, because she believes that she was spared as a child from the fire by this god, a god that she imagined as having answered her wishes when she desired for the school to burn, perhaps to absolve herself of some sort of responsibility. Who knows, maybe she started the fire. Anyway, as Mamimi would believe, the fire happened for a reason. She was saved for a reason. It was all God's plan. But In reality, it didn't, she wasn't, it wasn't. The fire and her survival was as random as anything else, and her supposed god is simply a manufactured object upon which she has chosen to project her desired meaning. And speaking of projecting meaning where there is none, I'm going to do that in a minute with Fooly Cooly Alternative. Let's imagine that you decide to build and launch a bottle rocket for fun. And then a giant pin falls on top of your house. And then a robot attacks. You deal with the problem, and then you rebuild and launch your rocket somewhere else the next day. Life goes on. Case closed. You see where I'm going with this, I hope. Fooly Cooly Alt is the real reason that I'm making this video. When I watched it rather recently, I was quite enthralled by its compellingly raw satire of the present day's political discussions surrounding climate change, as well as how it goes further back to the roots of Fooly Cooly to emphasize the theme of apocalypse as the central driving force of its own story. Alternative's episodes are far less plot-driven than Progressive's, placing a heavy focus on school life, dates, confessions, friendships, part-time jobs, lunch with friends, all just regular life stuff, as we get to know Kana and her friends, all Persona-like. Just with, robots versus guitar fights as you do. It establishes a comfortable loop of narrative structure that builds an excellent contrast with the underlying plot, which is only less and less subtle as the story proceeds. What starts as the TV in the background and newspaper clippings on the sidelines gradually bubbles to the surface as the ramifications of the apocalypse come to directly affect the lives of our characters, and everyone complains about how goddamn hot it is.
Seriously?
Yeah.
They actually said Earth is going to disappear? I don't think that's true.
Yeah, it's getting super hot these days.
I know, what's going on?
And although I wasn't there for the California wildfires, Fooly Cooly Alternative paints an effective, empathetic picture of what I imagine they must have been like. A quiet, slow build towards the crisis, perhaps observed by those whose job it is to pay attention, but by and large, unnoticed or overlooked by everyone living their lives before the flames hit. And as the flames' edge slyly licks the streets, they empty, leaving behind the stagnating, stifling hot air, the hollow echoes of the distant sirens, bouncing off the empty, abandoned cars, the signs, the houses, the shadows of the displaced, the deceased, and all the rich fucks who jumped ship. The city becomes a void, a cold, harrowing inferno, threatening to consume those who, for whatever reason, be it obligation, attachment, tradition, or hope, choose to remain. The apocalypse that Fooly Cooly Alternative depicts is the most grounded and thus the most terrifying of all three parts, chillingly painting the very real consequences of the cold, indifferent hand of modern society abandoning those unable to pay the price for survival. It's a startling turn for Fooly Cooly of all things, and without question marks Alternative as the most mature and reflective Fooly Cooly of them all. Fooly Cooly Alt also highlights a turning point in HarukA's character development. If you'll recall, in the original Fooly Cooly and Progressive, she was indifferent to the fate of the Earth, caring only about getting Atomisk and his powers all to herself. But it's evident that after spending so much time on Earth, she's gotten far more acclimated to this world and thus far fonder of the planet and its inhabitants. There is nothing at stake here, just, human lives. Something that Fooly Classic HarukA wouldn't give but a single hoot about. Atomisk isn't an incentive for HarukA in Alternative, and judging by her attitude, it doesn't seem she needs him. She's grown, clearly, since the events of Progressive, and now she is beyond futilely chasing him. Haruka's just decided that she kind of likes Earth, and so she's just here to have a little bit of fun while she sincerely sets out to save the planet from medical mechanica. Hardly does she cause any of the drama that occurs, only arrive after something has happened to, help in her own way. Make no mistake, this is still certainly the same Haruka, but she's more pronounced, empathetic, and cooperative, maybe even a little taller than the old Haruka of Classic and Pro.
It's 'cause you're getting old.
Nah, aliens don't ever age. I've been 19 for years now.
Once a bonkers antagonist, but now an eccentric, occasionally contemplative hero. The eccentric hero who, in cooperation with the now defunded defense agency that she once opposed, leaps into action to save the world, or rather, use Kana to save the world. But what does Kana think of all this?
I want to keep it the same.
What the same?
Like it's always been. I want to keep it the same. I want things to always stay the same.
Well, unlike Naota, Kana is, actually a relatable protagonist for starters, but like Naota, Kana is stubborn and doesn't care about the apocalypse.
That's right. It is love that will save the world.
Why is everybody talking about love? I can't take it! I'm sorry, but I'm leaving!
But where Naota didn't care simply because it had nothing to do with him, Kana doesn't care because she very strongly cares about what does have to do with her. It is quite telling that when she learns Pets is leaving for Mars, she cares not one inkling about the reason why Pets is leaving, only that she is, and that her world is being shaken for it. Kana chooses to overlook the apocalypse because, while she is well aware that one is coming, fully accepting it is another matter. Many of us don't want to think about climate change, or really any other crises that plague our current society. We all have lives, friends, world all our own, all of it stable and unchanging today, and no one wants to think that it could all disappear tomorrow. But it could, it can, it will. And as I'm sure so many of us will do should the end come in our own lifetimes, Kana will not, cannot face that reality. And as she's brought by Haruka to confront medical mechanica with the exceptional power of her NO channel, she bends time and space beyond reason to keep it the same. Just to keep all of it the same. It's a profound visualization of a power fantasy shared by many of today's youth, myself included. We want to stand up, to scream, to tell the system to fuck off and let us live our lives peacefully, and we want the power to make it so. But we can't. We can only wait for the Inferno.